Hey, everybody. How you doing today?
Welcome, guys.
My name's Jeremy.
I'm Jeff.
And together we are What More Could You Want? And today we are so happy we get to have another guest in studio, a local gentleman here, Keith Duncan. Keith, welcome to the show.
Thanks, guys. Jeremy, Jeff, it's a treat being here. I've kind of been watching the brand and the show.
Yeah, well, thank you. Because,
Appreciate it.
you know, I'll get into it more, but Keith and I met at a local interest venue at a distillery in St. Louis. It's still 630. And sometimes you meet someone that you just go, shit, this is too easy, man. The conversation is going way too well. And we've stayed in touch ever since. Thankfully, I'm very, very grateful for that. And so we bring Keith today because he is a brilliant mind. He's a wonderful person. And I think that you ought to listen to it, and I think you're going to enjoy it. So without further ado, I'm going to take a sip of this non-alcoholic beer, and I'm going to get started to read him something here. All right. So Keith Duncan. Keith comes to us with over 25 years of experience in microscopy and imaging for plant cell biology. For 16 years, Keith acted as a senior research associate for DuPont Pioneer, where he performed advanced microscopy and imaging for all aspects of plant cell biology, including light, fluorescence, laser, electron, and X-ray microscopy and imaging. Keith and his family recently moved from Delaware to St. Louis, where he now performs as a research scientist in Chris Topp's lab, as well as manager of their new X-ray tomography system, which is one of the first of its kind in North America, dedicated entirely to plant biology at the prestigious Donald Danforth Plant Science Center. Regarding them, their mission is to improve the human condition through plant science, as plants are wonderful teachers. They reveal astonishing secrets about the world around us and show us how together we can make it better. They currently work hand in hand with 20-plus countries. They have written over 1,300 peer-reviewed publications. They also provide an annual economic impact of over $352 million to the St. Louis area. Keith does not let the dust settle often, as he is also responsible for over 40 publications himself in his field. Keith, just that. And I know there was some about your company, and I know that some was about you. And I'd like to get into all of these sections if we can. But I am just curious, how did you get into this? How did you find your love for the study of plants?
Yes.
Yeah, so there's a great story there. And in fact, if you talk to most scientists, if you can actually get them to talk, and that's honestly a big problem. Communication with scientists is a big problem. But if you can talk to them and find out where that came from, typically you'll find a good story. I grew up in Detroit in the 60s and 70s, and at the time, we lived, if you've heard of the movie 8 Mile, we lived on 12 Mile.
Oh, okay.
Which, interestingly enough, that means it's 12 miles out of the center of the city. 8 Mile was the city border. So
Gotcha.
I don't know if that's creative or just utilitarian.
It sounds like probably both.
Yeah.
Someone had a great idea.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, straight on, and Woodward Avenue is the main drag from the center of Detroit all the way up to the top of the state. So 12 Mile and Woodward. This area was surrounded by elm trees, and they'd been there for decades, from the early days of the auto company barons who lived around downtown before they sort of split. But our street and many of them around were just literally covered like tunnels of these huge elm trees. And that's an awesome thing for a kid growing up, especially when you don't even notice it.
Do those have the helicopters? The elm tree?
No,
no,
not
okay.
yet, no. Those a lot of oaks and maples have the helicopters.
Gotcha.
I would have known either.
Yeah, I'm like taking a swing here.
But what they do get is a horrendous fungal disease. There's a pathogen of oak trees that literally just wipes them out in a couple of years. Basically, beetles will invade the bark and then start drilling in, and the fungus gets in behind it, and then they block up all the plumbing. They block up all the plumbing, all the vasculature, and it wipes out entire big sections. No resistant trees in the country. So within less than 5 years, there were around the country millions and millions of trees that were wiped out. Mm-hmm. And just on our street, literally every single tree got taken out. Every single tree. And here I am, a 9, 10, 11-year-old kid going, what the hell just happened?
Yeah.
One, I didn't even know trees got sick. Yeah. And to get them wiped out like that was amazing. Even just in our yard, we had about a dozen. Well, now we have all this cut wood in the yard. And this is Michigan. It's cold in the winter. We have a fireplace. So I learned how to use a sledgehammer and a wedge. And made firewood and the whole deal. Right. What is that? Twice warmed.
Yeah. Yep.
But while you're doing this, the bark is falling off, and suddenly there's all these channels that you see on the surface of the wood. And one, it was just cool. But then I'm looking at these channels and realizing that's where the beetles were growing or just chewing.
Yeah, yeah.
And then the fungus gets laid in behind it. And, that got me just to be aware of the fact that plants got sick and trees got sick. So that was always in my head. But the other side was I was a tremendous geek as a kid.
Yeah.
I played with a microscope a ton. When I wasn't out playing street hockey, I mean, I was kind of the whole jock and everything else. I couldn't do any instruments, no musical talent at all. I mean, I was hopeless there. I had 2 of the 3, but academics and athletics, but no arts.
Sure.
Love it. I just can't do it.
Yeah.
But I always had a microscope around, and I had a choice. I could do my homework, or I could put shit under the microscope and look at it.
Yeah.
I was grabbing everything that would fit. You look at a chunk of skin or a patch that you put on your clothes. I mean, just the fibers. Suddenly, the shit was interesting.
Yeah, you can see the underbelly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I didn't realize until actually I was in college, I got very, very comfortable looking at these monocular microscopes with one eye and was totally comfortable with it. Well, I didn't realize that a lot of folks have trouble with that. They stick one eye and they can't see anything because they just can't line it up.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that I always did that. So here it is, a skill that I have, something that makes me feel good and something that makes me, better than other people around me. Well, that always feeds your ego.
Totally.
So I just always was playing with a microscope and then helping other people with a microscope. And that was just something I always did.
Yeah.
Those 2 things just always stayed with me. So I go to college. I think I'm going to go into med school. And within about a year, I realized I hated all the med school kids because they were such pricks. They were always...
It's a different breed, right?
Well, yeah, they cared about the grade, but not the material.
Yeah.
And here I am trying to learn the material and different directions.
Yeah.
Well, fair enough.
We need the grade for the next round.
Right. Yeah.
And then, all right, what am I doing with this? I'm going to graduate. Well, in science, you go to graduate school to focus in more and more on more and more specialties. I mean, in undergrad, you're learning everything. You're learning physics and chemistry and biology, and some biology is a little more focused. And I was focusing on plants more so than animals and grad school. Then, all right, I went in the plant pathology department in the University of Georgia.
Yeah.
So that was literally specifically dealing with plant disease. Well, even there, you've got bacteria and viruses and nematodes, worms from the soil, as well as fungi. Well, in terms of plant disease, 70-ish% are caused by fungi. And they wipe out plants around the world. That's why the Kennedys were here. The Irish potato famine in the 1800s, caused by a fungus.
Can I ask you? Can I interject real quick?
Yeah, definitely.
So, did you ever realize when you got into college, or the university there in Georgia, and the place you ended up was based on the same thing that garnered your love for the entire field? I mean, it was a plant-based fungus, right?
Yep.
It's the same thing that happened to the tree. And here you are 15, 18 years later, whatever it is, and you're doing the same thing, man. Like, that's pretty fucking cool.
Yeah, it wasn't a plan. I think I can see it only because I look back at it.
Gotcha.
If you're walking through a wheat field and everything in front of you looks the same, once you turn around, you can see your path.
Yeah.
There's no way you'd see it looking in front. It's everything's the same.
Yeah.
There's just
Totally.
stuff that I like and stuff that I'm doing.
I think it's pretty remarkable. Not a lot of people can probably say that.
No, that's a neat way of putting it too.
Yeah, totally.
Especially.
Yeah, so it's cool. So that there are always these interest in plants get diseases, and I'm good with a microscope. Well, what do you do with that? It just ended up tending toward the things you're good at and the things you like doing, and it was plant pathology. And then how do I make microscopes part of it? Well, in order to understand how the diseases work, you have to know how they get in and where they go. And then if you have a plant that gets infected, you also have resistant ones, just like humans are susceptible or resistant. Well, what does it look like when the fungus doesn't work? Where does it stop? So you can learn a lot about the mechanism of resistance by figuring out where the fungus gets defeated. What's the plant doing?
Yeah.
And it turns out it's really complicated, but at least knowing where to look is helpful. So there's always aspects of microscopy. And then there's so many ways to look now. And, as you read off, there's light and fluorescence and laser and electron and X-ray. There's so many ways to look in, and they answer different types of questions.
Sure.
So understanding all of that gives me a lot of tools to work with to try to do that. So, there was one company basically in the late 80s, that was doing this kind of work. This was a large agrochemical company in Delaware that was headquartered there for over 200 years.
Gotcha.
And they were willing to put out the money back in the 70s and 80s to start a lab specifically for imaging in plant biology. Now that's, back then companies would do that. They just said, here's a good region. We should be putting money on this and let's see what comes out of it. Mm-hmm. All that's gone away. I mean, they don't do that anymore. No companies do. Yeah. But what happened was there was a lab that was fully outfitted at the cutting edge of imaging, looking at plant biology. Well, perfect fit. I ended up getting hired there in... my first official day was January of 1991.
Oh, right on.
30 years ago.
Yeah.
And so I was there for 25 years, and we were literally at the cutting edge of doing plant-specific microscopy and imaging because we had all the tools, and between the few of us there, we had this kind of unique blend of love of plant biology and plant pathology and the imaging stuff. Perfect fit. That all disappeared 5 years ago this month in a puff of corporate mergers. Oh, no. So a 25-year career was suddenly just literally ripped out from under me.
Right, right. I recall us discussing that when we met.
Yeah, and that's what ended up bringing me here. And it was a matter of, I would be much more comfortable with it if it was something, that was done maliciously, like, let's get rid of these guys.
Yeah, sure.
But it was the result of the lack of thought.
Right. It was just a it's a side thought.
Yeah. Let's just eliminate this entire section out of Delaware.
Yeah.
And not look below the hood to figure out what actually just left your capability. Yeah. And it was this total absence of any connection to a reason, which was so upsetting. And, I think I've told you before, January of 2016 was just the darkest, blackest month of my life.
Yeah. Let's get into it. What happened?
Well, we were, a very good friend of mine who was also my boss and my mentor. I'd known him when I was in graduate school. I studied his work, and then I got to work in his lab at DuPont for years. That was phenomenal.
Right. And
we ended up becoming very close friends. 2015, he says, "Look, I'm going to retire at the end of next year. We need someone else to lead the lab. So, we're going to groom you to take care of that. You're going to be the director of this imaging facility when I retire at the end of 2016." So that was very cool.
Yeah.
Very exciting. We're going to go out and purchase an X-ray microscope, which was a really new technology at the time. And this was going to be a huge challenge. And now I loved being in the lab because I could just ignore the world and do my work. Well, now I'm going to have to do some work, but also manage people and do hiring and budgets and keep up with the technology. Fair enough. That's a challenge. I was going to turn 50 years old. I was getting a new challenge. I was going to keep developing. I mean, that's an exciting life.
Totally.
And that all was kind of formalized in November of 2015. And then 3 weeks later, they just have this random meeting where all the people at the DuPont experimental station gather in one room and they say, "Okay, you're all going to get laid off next month. Merry Christmas."
Oh, nice.
Wow.
So it was from up here to just this plummet.
Yeah.
And it's not like, one or two positions. This is hundreds of scientists. Here's a fun trivia aside. One of the researchers in the third floor above me was this very famous plant biochemist. He did a lot of work with small RNAs. Now that's important now because of the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines are based on small RNA technology. Well, we've been doing that in plant biology for 15 years.
Yeah.
And this guy's one of the world's leaders in that. But he had this side gig where he played with a band that was out of Southern California during kind of the pop punk era in the 70s.
I think I might know who. Go ahead.
And his name is Milo.
That's who my son is named after.
Milo
Ackerman, yeah.
He's a buddy of mine.
Yeah, the Descendants.
And exactly. So he sings for the Descendants.
Dude, you're making me buzz over here right now. Are you kidding me?
No, I'm totally serious. I could get my phone and show you when he played at the pageant. When they played at the pageant, we had the most highly educated groupies you've ever seen because about a dozen scientists from the Danforth Center were all backstage and we're pogo up. It was a blast.
That's why I loved him, because he left music for so long because he was a scientist and he was going to go do science shit. And it broke my heart. I was like, oh my God. But then he came back and they're doing it again. And I just always really thought that his combination of intellect and fun was exactly what I would view my son as before he was born. And I probably should have done that, but that's what I did. I'm human. So, I named him Milo. And anybody that ever hears his name now that has an idea is like, wait a minute. I've only ever heard of one other Milo.
Is he going to go to college?
Yeah, but I'm sure he will. He's, but he is that great blend of intellect and humor and fun too. So it paid off. But you're blowing me away right now because it's my number one, number two all-time band.
Awesome.
Yeah, man.
Well, Milo's on the third floor, and he was one of the, casualties as well. So Milo and I got shit canned at the same time, but I think his gig is a hell of a lot more exciting than mine is right now, although just different.
Yeah. So what is it now that he's doing?
Oh, he's touring.
Just that. Okay, you're referring to the
touring
music.
with the Descendants. Yeah, he's just touring with the Descendants.
You're freaking me out right now, man.
Different crowd.
I'm serious. My wig has been flipped.
The degrees of separation, man. It's crazy.
Yeah.
It is fun. So that was, he was one of the casualties as well. So they made the announcement in December, and then you have to go through the administrative crap. And this is where I kept getting blown away. I was just it was like I thought I was looking at someone else having to go through this because it was so bizarre. They would have various meetings where they're trying to, organize this departure of all of these people and all these facilities and all this equipment and everything else. And it almost came across as comical because in the first meeting they were saying, we've got so many you people to get rid of. We're going to have to do it all month long. And that's how it came across.
Wow, this sounds like a government operation.
Well, that's what I mean. It was breathtaking in its lack of thought. And there was no organization. There's no thought to it.
Yeah. It's so funny how if somebody can't see and feel, if there's not a tangible thing that you're producing for them, they have no interest in you whatsoever. Yeah. And I think that runs rampant across the population.
I agree completely in every facet of business.
Yeah.
If you're not directly doing something that impacts the person so many levels above you, well, you're useless when you could be a key role to a whole other world that they know nothing about.
Yeah, man. It's that open mind versus closed mind.
Yeah, so, exactly. Anyway. Yeah, Jeff, you nailed it. Absolutely, because there were so many aspects that were now gone, which were critical tools for answering specific scientific questions that this company was depending on. Mm-hmm. And the level of sheer incompetence in their decision-making was breathtaking.
Yeah.
They're still getting in touch with me to try to, ask me, hey, can you help us with this? Can you help us with that? And I had three options. I could rant and rave in an email back at them, or I could not respond at all.
Yeah.
Or I could respond with, well, my consulting fee currently is $1,000 an hour if you'd like to discuss it.
Sure.
And typically what I do is I just don't respond at all because, they haven't earned that much out of me. I'm not going to respond to them.
That's wonderful that you've been able to set boundaries like that in your professional career. Too many people can't.
Yeah, well, it was, those are the positive aspects of what I was going through in that month. Yeah. Now, specifically our imaging facility, because it was unique. I mean, we had well over $2 million worth of just instruments alone, just the microscopes. Yeah. And then like a very good camera, that camera can only take pictures of a subject. If you're butt ugly, that camera won't change it. So if my samples are shit, the best microscopes are going to tell me how bad the sample is. So 2/3 of our time is spent in sample preparation to make sure that what we're looking at actually represents biology. We call it biologically relevant. And a lot of the science was how can we look at aspects of biology in such a specific way that we know we're not causing the change that we're looking at.
Yeah, sure.
So sample prep equipment, everything else, a huge, massively outfitted lab. Well, they simply couldn't understand that it wasn't just an office where they have to get rid of file cabinets.
Right.
And
some really high-end equipment here.
Yeah, so there were also, there were some schemes going on because there were managers who kind of figured out what was going on because of the kind of questions that would filter down. Like, hey, do you know any nonprofits who would, benefit from donating a lot of microscopy equipment? I'm going,
oh, geez.
Isn't it nice of me to help you while I'm being killed? Guys, we're going to hang you at the end of the month, but we don't know how to build the gallows. Could you build it for us?
Totally, yeah.
This was the mindset.
Yeah, where can we get some rope?
Yeah, and we'll have to build the scaffold and the stairs. We don't even know how to design it. Could you, buy the equipment for us?
Right.
And it was all of this every day, and it kept getting worse and worse and worse.
Wow.
And I was drinking heavily that month. I mean, that was the only way I could end up lying down and not be awake thinking.
Yeah.
So I had to turn off the brain.
Mm-hmm. And it's not easy to do.
It is. It was difficult. And, happily I'm out on the other side of it.
Sure.
A great Rush lyric was, even though you're going through hell, keep on going, meaning you'll be out the other side at some point.
Man, we've said on the show numerous times, and I learned in my training back when I was a kid, you encounter an ambush, there's only one way through it, and that's straight through it.
Yep.
You can't fuck around. You can't stop and think about it. You got to go. You're going to lose a couple things, couple people, but you're going to make it, by and large.
No retreating in life, that's for sure.
Yeah, for real.
Well, my father-in-law actually was almost indirectly very helpful in that regard. He was a career Army officer and did 2 tours in Vietnam. He actually got grooved by a rocket, which sent him home like 3 weeks before his second
Grooved.
tour. Well, that grooved was cool. It wasn't like a direct hit. It was skimmed. But it was the same thing. He was in the Phoenix Project in Vietnam. He was doing a lot of this stuff, but he was a captain, and he said, look, I'm not going to tell my guys to do anything I'm not willing to do. Yeah. So he was the one leading through. He was the one going into these tunnels with a knife in his mouth, a torch or a flashlight, and a 45.
Right.
Because he was a relatively short guy.
Jeez.
So he's doing this stuff. So, he would have comments that I don't know that were deliberate, but clearly came from that mindset of go. You got to go through it. You can't step backward through that.
Yeah. It's of all the bad that I gained from my military career, all of us gain a lot of things that are good. Mm-hmm. And a lot of it is good for when the shit hits the fan, kind of good. You might not see it when you go with your wife to the grocery store and you get in an argument about picking out some cereal. But if somebody comes knocking on that door and they ain't supposed to be there, you've got a much greater chance of being able to cope with that, much quicker without thinking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's you're absolutely right. That's why I say that. Your dad had some shit baked into him that helped with that.
Yeah. That was Ashlyn's father. And we get along great now. We take vacations. It's fantastic. But there's always that aspect of his background that is a fundamental part of his personality. And that was one of the things that helped me and Ashlyn sort of trudge through this.
Sure. Yeah. So everybody's getting shit canned. Mm-hmm. The writing's on the wall. Nobody's getting any help. What do you do, man?
Yeah. Well, that was the most important thing for that month was I had unique talents and knowledge and capabilities. So I needed to be able to market those. But DuPont also has, as businesses do, look, you can't just sell the technology. Well, in science, what you can do is you can publish peer-reviewed journals and take this technology and apply it to a specific problem. We'd been doing that for most of the year, and we were right about the time to wrap up this publication and get it out there. So I spent all my sober hours during the month doing image analysis and arranging images for the final publication so it would be out in the public record. So then I could go to any other company or anything else, Monsanto at the time, the primary competitor of DuPont Pioneer, and say, look, this is a public knowledge or a public domain knowledge, and I'm an expert in this field. Yeah. This company's just gotten rid of it all because they don't think it's valuable anymore, but it would give them a competitive advantage if they kept it, but they're throwing it away. So here you go.
Nice.
I'm trying to think of ways to make myself valuable.
Yeah, that's a wonderful way to share throughout the community.
So yeah, my whole month of January was to make sure this publication got out so it's in the public domain and there's no trade secrets or anything there. So
right on.
We were able to do that. And now it's February. And now I'm staying at home every day now. And normally I'm in the lab 6-7 days a week, and this is a fundamental change in my world. And it was just weird.
Yeah.
So I get online and I explore my options. There's obviously only a handful of labs around the world to do this work. So of course I contact them.
Right.
Danforth Center was one of them. But the imaging facility they had there was relatively static. It hadn't developed much.
Yeah.
So there wasn't an opportunity there. But there was at the Australian National University in Canberra. And my parents are Australian. I've got dual citizenship. I could have just walked right over there and worked. No visa issues. Would have been great. So that actually was the only legitimate option that came up. Although the woman who was running the lab said, oh, crap, I just submitted my budget. Our new budgeting starts in September. Get a hold of me then. And here it is February.
At the Danforth Center?
No, this is ANU in Canberra, in Australia. So that was really the only positive feedback I got. After that, it was no other companies, no other institutions really were aware of the combination of skills I had.
Right.
So I didn't make it through the job search algorithms. So I ended up hearing nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, no, I didn't hear yes. I didn't hear no. It was crickets.
Yeah.
And so I'm just getting terrified. What the hell's going on?
Right.
So go through this for a month or so, and Ashlyn is the rock here. I mean, she's on the outside making sure I keep my shit together. You focus on getting a job, and I'll take care of everything else, and that worked out great. Don't have kids. We never did. I mean, she taught 8th graders for 20 years. We've had thousands of other people's kids. We don't need any of our own.
I understand.
But that made it at least much more flexible for us to be able to move
Sure.
if we had to. And then, so she kind of kept asking the question, look, if there's nothing left here in Delaware, and that was the whole point. I mean, all the jobs were gone.
Yeah.
Gone. Nothing. It's like auto jobs in Detroit. No, they're gone.
Yeah.
Where do we go? And this was a bit of a joke. What I misheard her saying was, where did Pioneer go, the specific company that I was working for?
Sure.
They have a headquarters in just outside Des Moines, Iowa.
Yeah, that's an ag company, right?
Yeah, they make a lot of seed. They've been around for a long time. They've now changed their name. So it was DuPont merged with Dow. DuPont owned Pioneer, so it was DuPont Pioneer. Now it was Dow DuPont Pioneer, and now they've changed the name to Corteva, so it's now Dow DuPont Pioneer Corteva or something.
Nice.
That just flows right off the tongue.
It does, yeah. It's easier to remember. I like it.
Well, there's
Giant sign in a cornfield when you get your seed.
Billboard.
Giant billboard of seeds you ordered.
Well, that's actually the only reason they kept the Pioneer name, because it's so recognizable.
Yep.
Oh, you see it all throughout the corn belt.
Oh, big time. Yeah,
My
corn,
grandpa's a farmer. He used that seed. Yeah, I remember the signs in the fields, in the bags. Yeah.
corn and beans. I mean, it's a great product. There's no question, because
Sure.
there's tons of research that went into those. But you know what they're
Right.
doing now, it's mostly just hoping and then contracting whatever they could buy off Monsanto or Bayer now.
Wow. That sucks. So anyway, yeah.
Yeah, so I forgot where the hell I was going with
Oh
that.
no, that's okay. We were talking about your wife was really the rock for
Yeah.
you during that month.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And so she asked the question, well, the bottom line is, where do we go? Where are the jobs if they're not in Delaware? And what I misheard was, where's Pioneer going to be? And I was thinking, well, their headquarters is in Iowa. And she heard me answer Iowa, and she looked and she blinked. Okay, where else are the jobs going to be? And then I figured out what the question was. I said, oh, okay, well, there's three possibilities. We could go to Raleigh-Durham, you know, the Research Triangle Park in North Carolina.
Lovely area.
A lot of ag research there, a lot of private companies, a lot of universities. We could go to the Bay Area in California, which is an immediate no-starter because no one can afford to live there.
Yeah.
Or you could go to St. Louis.
Yeah.
And so we're looking at Raleigh-Durham, which is still technically East Coast dollars compared to St. Louis.
Totally.
Midwest money, different scale.
Yeah.
And then I saw that there were a couple of companies actually closing in Raleigh-Durham. And here I am, I'm going online now to, you know, the local business papers, you know, the things they hand out at the supermarket to find out, you know, what's the pulse on the ground? Are the grocery prices going up? What's the economy like? So it became pretty obvious within a couple days of careful thought that St. Louis was the place to go.
Even without a landing zone.
With nothing. It was, if I was going to work in the field that I had expertise in, it was going to happen in St. Louis. Now, my other expertise was kind of paint and drywall, so I figured I could do that anywhere.
But yeah, totally. Absolutely.
So we set in motion, all right, we're going to leave in the summertime. And again, Ashlyn knew the real estate market. She happened to be working as an office manager at a local real estate place. So she knew when the market was up, when it was down,
Good skills.
when the best time to sell, local markets, et cetera. So we started doing all the remodeling. I mean, paint and drywall. So here I am filling my days, sanding and repainting the entire place, some desperately bland color that would work for selling.
Right. Right.
Got cheap carpet to fill the entire place. Did the whole thing, remodeled the kitchen, everything.
Nice.
And it paid off because by dumb luck, the real estate group that was handling our house, one of the other agents in the same group had a potential buyer, and they knew the place was available and just casually asked us, look, can we have a look before we actually put it on the market?
Oh my.
So we had a deal, I mean, within minutes of opening it.
Awesome.
And we got asking. So
Can't be mad at that, huh?
No.
that was a huge help. So we needed that pack of cash in order to move.
Yeah.
So we didn't know where we were going to live. So we got essentially something like pods. We got a 28-foot tractor trailer. They dropped it off. We have it for 24 hours. We fill it.
Yeah.
And then they just hook up the cab and drive it out well, somewhere.
Yeah.
And they park it until we call for it. So we packed everything in there we could, and we had what would fit in Ashlyn's car, what would fit in my car, apart from a channel down the middle so the cats could walk around.
Right.
And we drove to St. Louis.
Nice.
Ash had arranged for a furnished apartment downtown for 3 months because we paid cash up front. Said, look, we're going to look for work. And if we need it month by month after that, they were so thrilled we paid cash. They said, yeah, whatever you need.
Right on. Yeah.
But that wouldn't come available till August 1st. And we closed on our place mid-July. So we drove out there and we stayed in the Homewood Suites for about 2 weeks.
Right on.
So we're living in a hotel. First day, we got there on a Sunday. The next day, we go to Six Flags. I mean, what else are you going to do?
Right. Might as well have fun.
Ashlyn got hired there, and she's now in their entertainment staff, although obviously right now they can't do this stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
But she does a lot of work there, which is kind of a dream retirement job.
Yeah. It's very cool.
So that happened within a day or two. So she was saying, well, I got a job. What's your problem?
Yeah. Mr. Smart Guy.
But
It sucks.
so this is where things start getting good. You know, we're now hitting on the upslope. Outside of my world, Chris Topp is a researcher, a principal investigator at the Danforth Center. And through the end of 2015 and all through 2016, he was working to get one of the first large-scale X-ray tomography instruments at the Danforth Center because he is a root biologist. We want to study root architecture. And the only way to do that is to rip it up out of the ground. Well, now you've just changed that whole architecture. So how can we look at it without ripping it up out of the ground?
Wow.
Well, folks are starting to work with X-ray instruments, but typically they weren't very large. They're, you know, in a geology department or a physics department, and very useful, but typically smaller stuff. He was able to talk to a company out of Rogers, Minnesota, North Star Imaging, and they make, you know, large format X-ray instruments, and they sell a dozen at a time to Boeing or to Honda or to Philips or electronics companies, you know, for non-destructive imaging, looking at parts, looking at welds, looking at engine blocks and aerospace parts. They'd never sold anything like this to a plant lab. And in fact, no one outside of Nottingham, England was doing anything like this. So Chris was able to get the funding and the backing from various companies to purchase this instrument for about $800,000. And it was being installed in the first week of August.
Yeah.
Well, he's also desperately busy, and he's been thinking, all right, well, I'll just hire a technician, you know, to kind of spin the dials, and I'll be in charge of it and you know, work out how that functions.
Right.
But really just didn't get any hits on the job offer. It hadn't been out for a couple of days, but here I am in the end of July in the Homewood Suites, and Ashlyn and I are in the habit of, she's firing off, hey, is this you? And would read a job description. I said, oh, no, that's pharmaceutical.
Right,
or
right.
Hey, is this you? And suddenly she says, hey, is this you? Danforth Center. I'm like, oh?
Right, yeah.
And then
I wonder if at first you're like, no. Oh, wait a minute.
and then it said X-ray imaging technician. I said, oh, sold. Give me that one.
Yeah.
So I immediately sent an email, you know, to the contact, and that was Chris. And he saw the email. My CV is attached, my resume and references. The whole thing is, I had everything obviously ready because practicing this. And he kind of glanced at it and then sort of set it aside. Said, "This is a fucking joke. This isn't real.
Yeah.
You know, what's the problem? Is this guy got an ankle bracelet or something? Is he on the run?"
A serial killer.
Can't find the good. Just scrap it.
Yeah.
So it was a matter of maybe 5 or 6 days later that, you know, in separate conversations with other scientists at the Danforth, in fact, one of the premier scientists at the Danforth Center was Blake Myers, and his wife at the time was at DuPont, and she also got laid off. Oh. You know, he had been brought out from the University of Delaware to the Danforth. Again, the Danforth is just a place where the top people in the world end up coming. It's just one of the best places on the planet to do plant biology. So Chris had heard kind of, well, you know, there are these scientists who are just now floating around in limbo. So he went back and looked at the resume and realized that, you know, the subject line of my email was imaging specialist now living in St. Louis, trying to find the quickest, shortest number of words to make the point.
Right.
And it worked. So, you know, he replied to the email and, hey, you want to come in for an interview? Came in, and honestly, it took about 5 minutes of chatting with Chris to realize that, oh man, this is perfect. This is just most incredible dumb luck.
Yeah. Do you think that he felt the same way?
Oh yeah, no,
Yeah?
we've talked about it since.
That's cool. That's refreshing.
At length. Yeah, at length, and we've talked about it at length because Chris had done some imaging in his graduate and PhD work, enough to realize what my background meant.
Yeah.
To the point where here's a new instrument and essentially a new application. So you can't just have a gearhead come in because they don't know plants.
Yeah.
You can't just have a plant person come in because they don't know the imaging and then the gear side of it.
Yeah.
To have someone who's got both aspects of it is the perfect situation to bring a new technology into plant science and plant biology. So
Yeah.
it was the first week, and we're working with this large format X-ray, and I'm having a blast. We're going, all right, this is our first instrument, already knowing we've got to get more in.
Right.
And it's literally exploded from there. So within those first few weeks and months, that's when I first met you, when I met Dave at Still 630, and just the ability to tell this story. I mean, I'm sure I needed to as well, to try to get some of that poison out.
Yeah, you had a lot of pressure built up.
Yeah, get a lot of that poison out, and then just embrace what's so incredible about this area.
Yeah, totally. And what I find incredible is that once again, Jeff, we see somebody who was in a dire situation, but exactly where they were supposed to be.
Yeah.
You were supposed to be suffering for just a short time because you were supposed to end up in St. Louis. You were supposed to be at the Danforth Center. There's no way they buy that imaging equipment and you're in town at the same time by chance.
Yeah, it's like you said at the wheat field. You just didn't see what was ahead through the wheat.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
It's beautiful to me to see it unfold and to hear people tell those stories. I think all too often people have those stories built in, but they don't put the pieces together. And then they just go, yeah, man, this year sucked, blah, blah, blah. But now I'm doing this and I'm making all this money. And they don't realize that everything they did in that suck got them there, you know? Just our take on it, I think, you know?
Yeah, there's a lot of pieces that had to fall into place. But as we kept on saying, it was an educated roll of the dice. You know, we gambled moving here sight unseen. We didn't have a job, didn't know anyone, no interviews. I mean, didn't even have a place to live apart from a hotel.
Yeah.
But we knew that if it was going to happen, it would happen here. And if we're on the ground, it's much more likely to happen than if they have to fly me in from Delaware or wherever the hell I ended up.
Yeah, you was well played, man.
So
you nailed it.
It was, calculated roll of the dice.
That's wonderful,
and
man.
It paid off.
It's kind of what they say, like you want to really go for something, you just abandon all other options and you go ahead first.
Brother, that's what I mean. I can say firsthand, that's what I did with Barrel.
Oh, yeah.
I left my corporate gig and the government life of my entire adult life and just threw it out. And I had nothing to go on to or go with, you know. Nobody held my hand. There was nothing. It was just like you. It was like, you know what? This is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to do it at all cost. And that's just what I'm going to do. And if I can't do it right away, I'll do something else. But this is what I'm going to do. Yeah.
Well, that's what impressed me so much about you personally and the Barrel brands specifically, because you chose to stop one and then start another.
Yeah.
You chose to step out of the corporate and the government and then to enter into this incredible journey.
I didn't have a choice, though.
I had it, I don't know if easier is the right word, but it was taken away from me and I had no choice. It was simply ripped away, so we had to do something.
Yeah, I think they're of the same cloth,
Yeah,
though.
I had no choice.
Right.
I had no ability to look at different options. No, it was simply gone. You're gone.
But the thing is we both somehow have been to that exact crux, right? That corner of the room where only one thing can happen, right? You either live or you die. And we chose to live because we didn't have any other choice. Mine was I couldn't mentally keep going. I lost faith in every structure around me. I broke down every conversation to a point where I was analyzing it and realizing that these people are full of shit. And this is all just a dog's tail wagging in the wind. They want to make a lot of money. And if you can't wag that tail the right way, well, you're not part of the boys club. Jeff knows, he's been there.
I experienced it too. Yeah. It's I think some type of business, you're going to find those people. Then you come along like where I'm at now, and all the people I work with are phenomenal. This board of people who I work with are phenomenal. But you don't want to sacrifice your life to the good of the cause. You're not part of this team. Well,
That's right.
There are things bigger in this life than the job at hand. Like, I have a family outside of this. I have other interests out. No, you should be here. I didn't know when I took the job, I'm signing the dotted line as a military. If I signed joined the military, I would have understood what I signed up for and would have understood the sacrifice that were coming. Most people don't take jobs and go, okay, now you're going to sacrifice all your life, your relationships, people are going to hate you. Why would you want to do that to people?
Right.
Yeah. And then you either see the light or you get brainwashed or, whatever. And
sometimes you dip in and you dip out.
Yeah.
You have your days where you're like, oh, I think I see something. Oh, shit, I'm drowning again.
And I think everybody goes through it,
Yeah, I think so,
it
too.
works out for some because they're at the point of their lives where that can happen. And like you have these unique set of skills. Well, you're only going to be able to use them technically at a few places that you kind of got to wait. And, it works.
Right on, man. Yeah, that's lovely. Well, I would like to say, and I'm sure I say it on behalf of anybody else that knows you and probably many that don't, I'm really glad you lost your shit in Delaware. I'm really glad you had a fucking horrible month in Delaware, dude, because I'm super stoked that you're here. From one human to another, you're rad, and I'm really happy you're here.
No, it's a treat, honestly. I mean, to be here doing the show, but just to be in this area.
Yeah, that's what I mean, man.
Absolutely. Say it all the time.
Read your stuff. I thought Jeremy got you to come in from Delaware. I'm like, oh, shit, okay. I was like, well, man, we're really pulling out the stops here. I'm like, holy
Not
shit.
Not quite, dude. Not quite, man.
He hopped on a plane. He's coming to St. Louis. He's going to be here just for this. And then I was like reading all the stuff over the past couple of days. I'm like, okay, he's in St. Louis. That makes way more sense.
Yeah,
when you first sent it, I was like, holy shit.
So now you're in St. Louis and you're planted. You've been here for a few years. What kind of projects are you working on over there now, man?
Neat stuff. So obviously we got the first X-ray instrument because we want to study root biology. What do the roots look like in there? Humans have been breeding plants for centuries and centuries, but breeding means you look at the above ground parts, the interesting bits.
Yeah, totally.
Fair enough. I mean, you should. But we can't see what's going on below the soil level very easily. So whatever roots are there just happen to be there. They weren't chosen because they were the sturdiest or the best. They just came along for the ride. Mm-hmm. So we want to be much more specific about that. We want to be able to understand what makes a root system better at using water, better at using nitrogen, particularly because the biggest cost in growing anything is dumping on fertilizer.
Yes.
Because nitrogen is 72% of the atmosphere, but the plants can't use it because it's not in a form that they can access.
Right.
There are bacteria that can literally pull nitrogen out of thin air, convert it into forms the plant can use. And these bacteria have been growing inside plant roots for, again, millions of years. Yeah. And that's a great relationship. Well, it's not always in the relationship. It's not always in the plants that we want to use. Like it's not in corn. It's not in wheat. It's not in rice. So how can we understand that interaction of microbes that are in the soil that are already doing good things for plants? How can we understand that relationship better and encourage it?
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
And
crazy.
It's a way to reduce the amount of fertilizer we use because the biggest cost is producing the fertilizer. I mean, breaking down nitrogen atoms into something the plant can use is an incredibly costly process.
Right.
So
well, yeah, if you break it down from manufacturing, loading it up into giant diesel-filled vehicles, tractors.
Hey, let's not forget about the plastic packaging.
Yeah, you're going down the line and you're talking about, the fuel cost of how long that takes. You think of 100,000 acre field, how many trips that's going to take, how many days, weeks, the time. That's millions of dollars.
Yeah, it's a massive industry, and there's not a simple answer like, well, let's not have cows anymore. Well, let's have some balance.
Right.
They don't generate.
Don't do that.
They don't generate that much methane. Plant-based is good for some aspects.
Yeah.
But you have to choose that plant protein correctly because if you're using a very small yielding plant, well, that protein's not going to go very far.
Yeah.
Is there infrastructure to handle that plant? I mean, do you have a combine that will harvest pea plants?
Right.
Well, not yet. So there's a lot of different questions that play into that. So
sure.
All of that, I mean, one of the projects is looking at the rhizosphere, and we're talking about everything below ground. And it may not be obvious to most folks, but the rhizosphere is probably the most complicated ecosystem on the planet. If you take 1 square yard of good soil, there's much more going on there in that square yard than any other square yard you can think of.
Sure.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Just by the number of different microbes and the chemistry going on, the physics going on, the water mechanics going on, plus the plants. And I mean,
just fungus alone.
Yeah. Oh, everything.
I mean, different spores and whatnot.
And just the complexity of the interaction is almost impossible to even imagine. So we're just understanding that is going to be huge. And some of the things we're doing is looking at soil cores. So you can take basically a machine you can put on the back of a tractor, and it literally digs a core out of the soil. We're working with a group at Kansas State who is providing about 55 of these cores from a bunch of different fields. They've been doing research out there on a specific set of fields for over 40 years, which is an awesome data set because they know exactly what happened every single year. Yeah. So they've got conventional tillage where you really tear up the soil a lot, kind of old-fashioned. You've got reduced tillage where you don't do that much of it. You have no-till where you leave a lot of the material behind. It keeps ideally it keeps the soil in place. You're not losing soil with erosion. And then there's essentially an unperturbed meadow next door. So we're getting cores from all of these.
Right.
And so we're going to look at that with the X-ray, both X-ray systems that we have, and try to understand, well, what does that soil look like physically? I mean, is it more dense? Does it have more air pockets? Does water move more freely? All of these are aspects that are just haven't been studied well enough to know, you can't just dump water on it and expect it'll work if it ponds. If it doesn't soak in.
It's fascinating because like the ground penetrating radar, when they do it to see like, oh, look, that's been disturbed, that's been set. Like they can find that. It's pretty similar. You're trying to do the same thing, but you're trying to find out what can the soil do and, everything that goes along with it for the biology of the plant. That's really cool.
Pretty neat.
You nailed it right on the head. I mean,
that's pretty neat.
Ground penetrating radar is one of the technologies that we're trying to work with to see, right now there's no magical X-ray you can take out to the field.
Yeah.
That it just doesn't work that way. But is there some way we can look at roots out in the field? Well, with the ground penetrating radar, it's just not good enough resolution. I mean, you can't figure out roots. And we would try, we'd actually bury a rake or a farm implement and bury it and say, well, okay, we can kind of pick that out. So resolution's not quite good enough.
Well, yeah, there's no way you're see.
No way, man.
I've seen them use those on TV shows and stuff. And it's like, how do you know what that is? That looks like a bump, but obviously I'm not a scientist. I'm not the one that does it, but that's very fascinating that you're taking, from, oh, you broke your arm? Let's find out exactly how. But we take these X-ray machines, we're going to put it in a field, and we're going to study a plant.
Yeah,
I think it was pretty cool.
Well, that's one useful way to kind of think of it. It is, most folks have gone to the hospital and had some level of X-ray or even what they call a CAT scan. And that's an old-fashioned name of computed axial tomography. Essentially, it means that you're spinning the X-ray system around the patient. The patient lies there very comfortable, very careful, and the X-ray system spins around it.
Sure.
Well, what we have is a little different. Our X-ray system is stationary, and our plant, will spin on a turntable. So we're projecting X-rays through the sample onto a detector. And based on how dense or non-dense the sample is, will show up as differences on the detector. So you take one single image. It's a 2D digital radiograph. Looks all the way through. Turntable moves a tiny little bit, you take another one. Tiny little bit of a turn. We'll do that thousands of times over the entire 360 degrees. So you get thousands of images of this volume. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, then that's where the CT actually comes in now. That's computed tomography. The computer algorithms have to take all those images from all those angles and put them back together into a single volume.
It's like computational photography almost.
Like the photogrammetry.
Yeah, the photos, you got.
I've seen them.
You got to link them onto the YouTube.
We can do that. Yeah, we can throw some photos.
I was blown away. Like just before we got on, I was like, man, it's like looking at like alien life or like a planet.
It's beautiful, isn't
Watching these little 30, 40-second YouTube videos of like the soybean flower, I think was probably one of the most fascinating ones out of all of them.
Right.
I went to the things that I knew from like, being a kid, my grandpa being a farmer, like the ear of corn. I'm like, okay, cool. They're on the outside of the corn, and it zooms out. Oh, we were inside the ear of corn. Holy shit. Okay.
Yeah, never mind.
And then like, oh, here's broccoli. I just had some of that. It's very fascinating to see the food and the things that we've seen over and over again in a manner that you've never even comprehended before.
Yeah.
I felt like a little kid looking at the stuff today. I was like, that is just so cool. Like I could just like put that on a loop.
Yeah,
but
man.
There's just, I don't know how many images there were, but I just started watching them all. But it is amazing what that machine can do and how it puts it all together. And it's like it came to life as that video plays.
Yeah, it's an amazing technology. And, again, to be able to apply it to plant science is new. And again, you mentioned, looking at the broccoli and the cauliflower. One of the aspects of the imaging that we do is could be summarized just by saying it's measurement. You know, if you want to increase your corn yield, well, the measurements are pretty simple. You increase the number of ears per bushel or grains per bushel. I mean, there's a pretty simple relationship. You can literally count.
Yeah.
But if you want to increase, you know, how much broccoli production is there, okay, well, you can weigh that big old head of broccoli, but what makes it bigger? We want to understand the biology that makes these things bigger. So when you look at an X-ray scan of a head of broccoli, you see that there's thousands and thousands of these little tiny florets in there. Well, how do we understand why the plant only made this number and can they make more? Well, if they make more, do we have to also have it make more branches to hold more of these things?
Yeah.
So all of these are governed by the genetics of the plant.
Structural engineering in plants.
not even thought that didn't even cross my head when I'm looking at those images of like, you know, that's what you're looking at, you know.
Yeah.
Obviously shows a untrained mind looking at it to a scientist, but no, it's very fascinating to think about. Like exactly, it's structural engineering for plants.
Absolutely, and you know, all the genes are there in the plant, and we just have to identify which is the one that's important for increasing yield, and let's make sure that those yield genes are in the broccoli, so we can make sure it happens. And the genes are subtle enough that this gene for yield only works when it's really wet. But this other one works only when it's dry. So understanding precisely what these genes are doing is a huge part of it. And the measurement comes in from, well, okay, we've got all these 1,000 broccoli plants, and we know that they're different. You kind of look at the heads and see they're different, but how do you quantify it?
Yeah.
Because a lot of the genes are, it's not like a light switch where it's on and off. You need 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 of them all working together, and they each contribute a little bit. And in order to find those, you're doing very complicated statistics, which is not my expertise.
Yeah.
But they are called quantitative trait loci, QTLs.
Yeah.
These are the factors that are not just one, but dozens in the broccoli plant. And
Right.
they somehow work together. So we try to understand this really complicated relationship of how do you get all these genes together to get one result?
Yeah.
And it has to start with measurement.
It seems to me that if some really smart IT types, and I mean the propeller head types, were to know more about how plant life worked, it may help in the technology world. Because everything that I'm starting to read and sort of buy into, just admit it here, is that all of these plants are talking to one another.
Yeah.
All these plants, hey, you need some help? We can help you. We're going to send something down the line. You need some of our water? We got you. We're going to give some back. Whatever it is. So I want to ask you, do you buy into that same thing because you're in that world? And do you think that the vast majority of people need to know more about that in order to become a better human on this planet? It's a little deep, but...
There's a lot to unpack there. I'll start with just kind of a phrase that I open up a lot of presentations. I do give a lot of presentations to the public. I've given pub talks. Alpha Brewing is a great place. They would always have Tuesday pub talks back when, you could do that.
Yeah. Right.
And like I said, kind of near the beginning, scientists are not always good at communicating. And this was one of the things my father always really pushed was you need to be able to explain something so that a non-expert will understand. You need to be able to do that. And it was a skill I've worked on. I've gotten comfortable with it.
Lowest common denominator.
But you still need to make the point, and you can't make it so dumb that you've lost meaning.
Yeah.
And it can't be so oversimplified that it's now inaccurate. And that's the basic problem with most of the news media. They oversimplify and it's now inaccurate or meaningless, or they've separated into two diametric opposites when in fact neither one is true at all. It's just kind of uncertain right here.
Yeah. They like to come in and blow shit up and run to the next thing, don't they?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, they got to sell their ad time tonight, and it doesn't matter what that happens tomorrow because they have to do it again. Different business, fair enough.
Totally.
So I'll have these slides at the beginning of most of my presentations, and here I am. Who am I? And I work at the Danforth. What's the Danforth? We study plant science. So why study plant science? I mean, and this is part of the question you were asking. Why should people be interested in this? Well, it's only important if you want to eat, drink, wear clothes, have medicine, and breathe. Other than that,
Sounds
it's
pretty
not
simple.
important.
Summing up, survival.
Exactly. And that's what I try to come back to at the end to say, look, we're studying all aspects of that: food production, clothing production, fiber production. The first viruses ever confirmed to exist in the world. I mean, people knew that there was something smaller than a bacterium, in the 1800s, but they couldn't see it.
Right.
1930, the tobacco mosaic virus was the first one proven to exist. It's a plant virus. So plant science has been critical in studying viruses for almost 100 years.
Yeah, makes sense.
The vaccines out right now, the protein that makes up the coronavirus has to be manufactured in order to study it, in order to see what will stop it. Well, how do you generate that protein? Well, we have the genetic sequence. That's the easy part. Plug that into tobacco plants, which is kind of the workhorse. And these tobacco plants will grow you kilogram quantities of the protein. So now everyone can study it. So plant science is playing a huge role in vaccine development.
Right. As of course it is. Like if you would stop and just think, it's got to play a role in the vaccine. It's got to play a role in pharma. It's got to play a role in everything because it's where everything comes from.
So many plants have been the answer to disease.
Yes, and
or fungi and everything else. Yeah,
absolutely. And so it's critical for folks to come back to that, to realize, this is why we're studying plant biology. Plant biology really is tremendously important. So understanding all those aspects. So that's one component of it.
What about the fact that it seems as if the plants are so maybe not dependent on one another, but that ecosystem is so perfect, and if it gets disrupted, it knows how to take a different route. It knows how to, okay, that's going to be dead now. We're going to move around that. We're going to keep going, but it never stops.
Well, it's like with bamboo and bonsai trees, like, simple things people know about. You probably might just laugh, but you move them from one room to another, they get stressed. They say it when you buy a bonsai tree at shop, you're going to lose leaves, this, and this. It's going to be stressed. Like you have to put it in good environments, and that switching it, sunlight, all these little variables, but just moving it I moved from that corner to this corner, it will freak the plant out.
Yeah.
You got to let them be. It's really crazy that what they pick up for something that most people look at and go, that's inanimate. That's nothing.
But I wonder if you took that bonsai tree or whatever it is and you put it, you planted it in an outdoor area in the ground where it could survive, but it was with other plants. Is there a way for other plants to actually not welcome it or take care of it, but you know what I mean? Like, are they putting off things that will help that plant to thrive there? And that gets into that bigger picture. Is everything really connected?
Yeah, it's an important one, and in many respects they are connected. But we have to be careful not to put too much of human awareness into what's going on, like taking a stranger and putting it in there. Will they right. welcome it and take care of it? Well, that's the wrong way to look at it, because it's a collection of biological material that's normally not in that situation. So
true.
The human view would be, oh man, they just killed it. Well, no, it's in the wrong place.
Just couldn't survive.
It's not adapted to be there.
Right.
But all of these adaptations, I mean, when you have a meadow, when you have a rainforest, when you have these ecosystems that have adapted, they have adapted interactions amongst each other. They're accustomed to getting signals from, whatever volatiles are dripping off leaves into the soil. The fungi in the soil are constantly interacting with all of the roots. So there is communication. There's a huge amount of information transfer back and forth and all around. So in that community, if a normal member is removed, well, they're accustomed to how to cope with that.
Gotcha.
If you put in a stranger, there's no coping mechanism, so it will likely not do well.
Sure.
Unless it's like a weed where it's already adapted to basically overrun everything in its path.
And isn't that sort of like a disease or an ailment that takes over until the area figures out how to deal with it and how to contain it? I mean,
or loses, like
or
kudzu.
loses. Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Kudzu will simply grow all over everything because that's what it's good at.
Yeah.
And so, but eventually, give it a couple thousand years, well, then that balance will return.
Yeah.
So it's a time scale that's much, much longer than moving your plant from one place to another, although understanding what those stressors are is part of the system.
Yeah.
Now, there's plants that are just dramatically more sensitive and don't respond in short time frames.
Yeah.
There are plants that do. You know, you think of any kind of vining plant, you can watch a 24-hour exposure of this little tendril literally going back and forth, looking for something to touch. And as soon as it touches something, well, then it's growing.
Yeah.
So that's a very rapid response.
Yeah.
And you've got everything in between, from a sequoia to a binding plant.
Right.
So, yeah, the connections are extraordinarily complicated. And even, you know, when you 50 years ago with the Green Revolution, when we're suddenly growing, you know, monoculture crops, we're suddenly realizing, wow, we can do this. And at the time, the scientific idea was, let's make it as sterile as possible, so we only have the one thing there, the corn plant.
Yep.
And then we can dump on stuff to make that corn plant flourish. Well, at that time, that thinking was extraordinary, because think of all the people we could feed.
Yeah.
What we were not aware of at the time was this unbelievably complicated rhizosphere, which we've talked about.
Yeah.
That is what we need to consider now. So that's why we're coming back to no-till. One of the projects we're working on is on a cover crop. So you plant your corn or your beans or whatever it is you're going to plant, but then you also plant pennycress, a plant that will lock in the soil. It will help to encourage microbial growth, but then you can harvest the seed as well for oil and protein.
Huh.
But it helps locking in the soil. So these are the practices that now have to become common. Well, they can't become common until, you know, nonprofit places like the Danforth figure out how it works, so that we can get these things into commercial production, so that they can actually get into the hands of producers.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. That's insane.
It's like things like, if my grandpa were alive, he probably just loved hearing what you do, because, you know, he's a farmer, you know, coming from that background. But like even his little garden, the things he would do, put hay over certain plants or wrap things. I'm like, well, what about, no, it'll be fine for it. Let it be. You know, like always ask those questions, and he'd let certain weeds grow in the cornfields or the soybean. No, those are fine. I'm like, you know, it just baffled me as a kid. And, you know, I guess it makes more sense as an adult, but he knew his ways from his, you know, 90 plus years in the earth. Like, it's those little tips and tricks, like you're saying, that people do by trial or by experiment. Okay, that worked. That didn't work.
Yeah.
You know?
And that's, you know, one of the stated aims of the Danforth Center is to not just do this cool research, but okay, we need to get it into the hands of the people who are actually going to be able to use it. Mm-hmm. And that's why, again, in the intro, you talked about 20 different countries.
Yeah.
A lot of the African countries, a lot of the Asian countries, they have expertise there, but they don't have the facilities. So again, their scientists come to the Danforth. They bring their specific crop with them, like cassava or groundnut.
Right.
And they do this cutting edge research here with the varieties that they use, so they can take them back, already approved by their governmental agencies, because it's the collaboration between us and their government and the USDA, to get their product into their fields as soon as possible, so they can grow and live. And that's
fascinating.
Yeah.
But let alone
food security is really, it's a huge statement.
It's refreshing, isn't it?
Yeah, to hear the co-collaboration of their government and working with you guys versus, well, we can speak upon our own, how long that could probably take.
Well, I mean, if we left our leadership to make us work together or help us work together, we never would. It's really nice to hear that organizations like yours are reaching out and being reached out to by other countries, other places in the world, because I don't think it's much different there than it is here. I mean, you have different climate, you have different things you're dealing with, but it's that ground and that subground and that next layer and that next layer. And I don't know, man, I think it's just really refreshing. It's cool to hear. I didn't realize that kind of stuff went on. I thought that we all lived in silos, and, you know, you do your research over there or you don't, because you don't have the technology or, you know, the money or the facilities.
Right. Well, and that's one of the drawbacks. You know, a corporation is obliged to be able to fund itself. So you're not going to spend too much money on something that isn't going to bring back an income. And there's enough business in North America to sell, again, the major crops, that the major companies are going to focus on that and spend less time, you know, in the third world sort of pro bono work, if you will. Right. And that's where private organizations and then government grants are really the biggest funding source at the Danforth. So things like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, they've given millions and millions in various different projects, because what they see is, one, we brought together some of the best scientists and facilities to address these questions that aren't very sexy in the economic terms,
right,
but are crucial for food security around the world.
Yeah.
And then they will facilitate those scientists coming in to work with us, and then help to make that happen out in in the local environment, because that's where it has to happen. That's where the people are going to benefit.
Yeah, if you don't integrate it, why are you doing it?
Yeah,
Exactly.
no point.
And then the other side that was much harder for me to understand, just because I didn't think about it, was there's a lot of talk about St. Louis being such a fantastic environment for startups, and especially ag biotech startups, and it's an incubator. And what I'm learning is that there are so many resources around, little labs or little people, little groups that have an idea. They can work in a large building. There's one next to the Danforth Center. There's the Cortex. There's a lot of different places around where scientists have these ideas. And then what happens is they get the private funding to address these really specific questions, because their colleagues, the people who are nearby, are all the ones who can offer the best expertise. So having all these people in the same area addressing similar aspects of the same question.
It's wonderful.
It really is, it makes St. Louis the place to be in the entire country to do plant science research, especially the sort of food security, cutting edge, feed the world kind of stuff. I mean, it sounds dramatic, but it's actually what we're doing.
And when you came to St. Louis, I remember you saying earlier, I knew that if I was going to do this kind of work, it was going to be in St. Louis. Did you understand the magnitude of what you were seeing?
No, okay. I didn't understand the incubator side of it. I didn't understand. I knew the big players for obvious reasons, but I wasn't aware at the ground level of how widespread the expertise was. Almost like garage labs, if you will.
Yeah,
someone who's got a great idea,
cool.
but then they're able to apply that because they just happen to be here. Surrounded. And the other thing is, Danforth scientists are also encouraged to kind of monetize what they've done. So there's a company, Benson Hill, which just opened up a couple months ago, this massive, huge facility right next door to the Danforth. And they address very specific questions in plant production, specific types of soybean production questions, the oils versus proteins, the soybean oil or the protein. I mean,
right.
You typically can't have both. Well, why not? Let's learn about it.
Sure.
Different optimized production techniques. That was started by, Danforth scientists who went out on their own. And that's also encouraged because, again, the bottom line is it gets the product out into the world.
Sure. Yeah, it meets the goal, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
it's like you were saying earlier, a corporation has the right to pay itself, right?
Yep.
Yeah, that's really cool, man. Okay, so I got another question for you about plants.
Yeah.
One in particular, cannabis.
Mm-hmm.
And you and I talked about it just briefly, but how does cannabis and what a lot of people say that it can do and that it does, how does that fit into your organization either now or in the future?
It's always an option for us to study now that they've changed the law. And that's the biggest, most important factor. For decades, there was no research allowed on marijuana. So the claims people are making right now are typically not based in scientific research.
That's why I asked.
Exactly. And it's the cannabidiol, which got great potential. And it's almost like the acetylsalicylic acid, the anisine of the plant world, because it probably can do all sorts of great things, but we don't know yet. So it's only been very, very recently, I mean, literally the past 2 or 3 years, where the federal regulations have been relaxed on who's allowed to do research. And I think for decades, there was literally just one lab in one place in the country that was allowed to do research. So therefore, we're deliberately burying our head in the sand, and let's choose not to even understand it, which is
such
horrendous.
A scary, like draconian, crazy way to live. Like it's a plant, and you're telling the world you can't study it.
6, 7 states now that are allowing study of psychotropics.
Yeah, I think also studying those as well. And again,
getting back to seeing what they can do with pulling research from what I guess was it the 60s they started doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot of psychoactives that are fungal produced deliberately. I mean, fungi are great at that. That's how they protect themselves, from predation. And this will piss off the organic people, but that's why I never ever eat organic stuff, because it has to protect itself. It's probably loaded with mycotoxins by fungi that are, not cleaned out by using fungicides or using resistant lines.
Oh, I never thought about that. Well, of course I didn't know it.
Why would you think that way? Yeah.
Jeez.
So in terms of studying cannabis, it is a valuable crop as much as anything else. So folks are open to write grants to do that kind of work.
It seems like that kind of work, given the amount of, the growers and I say that, I hope it's not a slang term.
No, that's actually the accurate term. Farmer is kind of the children's way of referring to
Got it.
growers.
Yeah. So a grower, if you will, I could see, we have a ton of them just in Southern Illinois, Central Illinois, Northern Illinois, just littered about because we've had medical and now recreational for quite some time. Well, for about a year now. I could see those organizations coming to your organization and saying, "Hey, we need a better yield. We need a cleaner yield. Our soil's not producing the way it should be in Illinois. Whatever it is." It seems like that could be a huge asset to those growers. And is that something that a private organization can come to you guys and say, "Hey, this is what we're trying to figure out," and obviously they have to fund something. I get that.
Yep.
But is that something that could be done?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay,
yeah,
cool.
I mean,
cool.
now that the restrictions on research are gone, it is a crop like any other, and it has tremendous potential. We just don't know what it is yet. So obviously the question is, let's study it.
Yeah, so that's from medical. It has many other uses anyway.
I can't wait for those.
It's a great fiber.
Yeah.
I can't wait for those studies to start coming out.
Yeah, there's tremendous potential there, and cannabis, like many other crops, is got fabulous potential as secondary metabolites, things that we can use to enhance our lives. I mean, that's how we now know what spices are. They're secondary metabolites. They're pesticides that the plant produces. The plant is producing these things so that the insects or herbivores don't eat them.
Yeah.
Well, we love them. They're called spices.
Sure.
They're the earliest pesticides on the planet.
It's amazing, man.
Yeah, it's like mind blowing. Yeah, think about that. It's like, okay.
Oh man. All right. So, Jeff, do you mind if I shift away from plants for a second?
Go. Yeah.
All right. Cool. So I noticed on your Facebook page when we were going back and forth with each other,
Yeah.
that you have an alias listed. And when I first saw it, I was like, it didn't hit me. And then I saw another reference somewhere, and then you brought it up today, the Dark Tower series.
Yep.
So you're a big Stephen King fan.
Yes.
Okay. And so for everybody that doesn't know, and I'm being very vague here, and how do you pronounce is it Cadet or Catet?
Catet.
Catet Deshane.
Yes.
And that is what it also goes by. And I was like, what in the Sam hell? And I started looking and realized that it was a Stephen King series. So you're a big fan of that.
Yeah.
Are you an avid reader otherwise?
Oh, as much as I can, yeah.
Yeah.
Stephen King is one, and Ashlyn is actually a bigger Stephen King head than I am.
Okay.
That was one of the things that we sort of connected on.
Yeah, your wife.
Yes.
Yeah.
Ashlyn is my wife.
Yeah.
But yeah, she's a even bigger Stephen King fan than I am. But I guess the other things I read, I've read all the Ian Fleming.
Yeah.
Including Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, if you didn't know he wrote that.
Dude, that was one of my favorites as a kid. Absolutely.
You remember the movie where at least 2 different James Bond actors were in the movie?
I don't remember it. I'm sure if I saw it now, I'd be like, oh my gosh, I remember it.
Desmond Llewellyn, who played Q.
Yeah.
He was the little tinkerer in one of the beginning parts of the movie.
Yeah.
And then Gert Frobe, who played Goldfinger, is the great big huge king, or the emperor.
Right.
So yeah, just all these little connections.
Got to credit my mom for that.
Ian Fleming things.
Yeah, that's pretty cool, man.
But yeah, a lot of science fiction stuff like Douglas Adams.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. Hitchhiker's Guide.
Yeah. I know you picked up on the Aldous Huxley book. So
Yeah. A lot of the sort of dystopian type novels like Anthem.
Did you ever get into any of the beatnik stuff when you were younger?
No, I didn't. No,
like Kerouac or anything like that?
No, I not deliberately avoided it, just didn't find it.
Yeah, I always found that stuff amazing because of all the avid drug use and like the descriptions of it all was very entertaining to me. I had no idea what they were talking about as far as the drugs, and I wasn't a drug user at the time. Not that I am now, but I digress. But I found it fascinating. It was very colorful. So that all caught my attention at an early age. I don't know. I thought there might have been a connection.
That was the traditional American author. Well, Jules Verne, getting in Mark Twain, all that. I liked all those outdoor ones and signs of fascination of what's in the ocean or what man did on the land. That's all.
Man.
Well, some of the earliest science fiction was Jules Verne.
Yeah, exactly.
Mary Shelley and Frankenstein. Some of the Victorian era stuff where it's the whole moral science world versus almost a religious morality. And
very true.
How they made Frankenstein's monster to be such a villain
Yeah.
where it was actually the Victorians who were the villains. If you reread, and I've gone back and reread a lot of this stuff, a lot of the Jules Verne, a lot of those stuff was really interesting to visit again as a grown up. Another one we were talking earlier, Heart of Darkness from Joseph Conrad was a fascinating read, and it was about adventurer explorers back in the 1800s. A lot of the colonial stuff where they're going into basically just exploit and destroy African countries because they're Europeans and they have this sort of mandate.
Yeah.
And some of the terrible things that went on when someone kind of goes native, they've been separated from reality so long, they start to freak out. And to think that Apocalypse Now is a spectacularly vivid portrayal of Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness.
Right.
Very different backgrounds, but a lot of the same themes running through it.
Yeah, that bravado and that machismo and that just taking everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was so interesting to see those sorts of things paired up.
Yeah, totally, man. Right on. Well, hey, let me ask you another question. Whenever I say the word sorghum, what's that mean to you?
Couple things. Sorghum whiskey.
Yeah.
Still 630. That was one of the earliest connections, again, that we had coming here. And when we got that first X-ray instrument, there's no manual on how to scan plants. I mean, they trained me for a week on how to look at engine parts because that's all they knew.
Right.
So I literally had to just play around with it to find out what settings do I need to change. Plant stuff is not dense, and X-rays are formed by differential density. You have a bone, which is really easy to see, but you don't see much of the skin around it in a regular X-ray.
Sure.
Well, most of plant tissue is like the skin around it. So how do you make adjustments to be able to see it? So we had sorghum plants in the lab. We were studying sorghum. And so I would literally take sorghum panicles and pin them up and image them inside the machine. And they were actually fascinating because they're so complicated.
Yeah.
And here you have this sorghum panicle, and if you're watching, it's about a foot tall, more or less, maybe 2 or 3 inches, like a giant corn dog.
Okay. Right. Nice.
That's
Hungry.
That's the narrow type, but there's also a massive variation and variety in types of sorghum that can actually, open out like the tassel on a corn plant.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So you can have totally closed, totally open, and everything in between.
Yeah.
Well, again, these are all differences, and how do we measure them? Well, let's scan them, and now we can do the computer to do all the measurements. So we're scanning sorghum from almost day one. So it was just this thing that I'd never worked with sorghum before, but here I am working with it, and then I go to the liquor store, and I'm just looking on the shelf, and, oh, man, there's a sorghum whiskey. Well, that was cool. So I bought it and brought it home just because it would be fun.
Sure.
And honestly, I didn't even realize till I got it home, wait a minute, this place is in St. Louis.
Yeah.
Still 630.
Wow.
So as a byproduct of the whole upheaval of life and changing everything and going out on this adventure, both Ashlyn and I now have a mentality of don't hesitate, just do it.
Yeah.
I immediately went online, figured out what Still 630 was, and immediately wrote Dave an email.
Yeah.
And just wrote him a full page of describing my story and saying, look, this is what's going on.
Yeah.
Not expecting a response, not knowing what was going on. He wrote back, said, dude, this is cool.
Yeah.
And I went down to the distillery, got the tour, tested the sorghum whiskey. It was fantastic. I made him a giant poster.
Yeah, I remember. That's why I remember that.
Yeah, a giant poster with the X-ray scan and saying sorghum like you've never seen it before, just because this was cool stuff.
Very.
And it was just part of the whole change in philosophy. I mean, I reached out to you the same way. I reached out to Mike Ramsey from Thunderhead for the same reason. Just saying, I saw Thunderhead. It was an awesome show, dude. This is great, and we're friends.
Well, I know that you're never one to hold back when you like something. You're going to tell somebody about it, and I really love that about you because so many people don't do that. Yeah. They take shit in, but they never give it back. They never. I love this. It was life-changing, but what do you do with it?
Yeah.
It's horrible.
I think that's a great point, though. Like, you wrote people not expecting a response, but you still told them something cool, and they responded to you. So, there are going to be people that you would do this, but there's something for all you listening. If someone has done something cool or something that you do interacts with what they do, tell them. Maybe you'll get a response, too.
Tell other people.
Share that stuff.
Yeah, our communal way of life has gotten really odd, how we all sort of seclude ourselves from each other. And right now, obviously more than ever. But a lot of people don't share. Like, it's as simple as a small business. If you come and you buy something from a small business, do us a favor. If you like it, tell somebody about it, you know? And if you post a review, well, that might show hundreds or thousands of people. But I do know that, that I've seen your name come up on a couple different reviews here and there, and they're very thorough, and they're very, they're always, very, very helpful. So I think
a
that's
scientist, no,
right. Yeah, no doubt. Right.
You know, but,
Or maybe an engineer, right?
Yeah.
Very analytical way of putting things out on paper. So it's lovely.
Well, to me, that actually it seems more authentic, it carries more weight because, you know, at this point, I'm often suspicious of official reviews because how many were written by the people who own the business or how many were written by bots.
Yeah.
But then the other side of it is if people ever bother to write anything, they write a complaint.
Yes.
And very often they're because they had a bad day, or maybe the server literally had a bad day and brought the wrong plate, but they corrected it and they apologized. But all you can do is bitch online about it. And so much of that is, I'm not crusading against it. It's a matter of, well, you can't fight against it. The numbers are too huge. Right. But what I can do is when I actually genuinely like something, I'll write about it. I try to. You know, when you get a receipt from the person at the post office who actually was helpful, and they circle their little survey thing, I'll try to actually remember to do that, and I'll try to remember their name because it makes a difference, because they made a difference. Yeah. It's such a tiny thing to do, and it can have such a huge effect.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I say that all the time, mostly just to my wife or to myself, excuse me. But if there's a chance to help somebody else out, even if it's just doing their job, I want to do it, you know, and I've baked in time to my day now. I don't like rush through my days anymore. You know, once I really sort of got in the groove with Beryl and got my head straight, like I build in time to do something silly like sit and fill out a survey. I'm not retired, but I sort of act like it. You know, I do what I need to do when I need to do it, and I try not to get too excited about it so that I can do things like what you're talking about. You know, but I don't know. It's just me. Maybe other people start doing it too. You know, tell somebody when they do something good.
Small little gesture can go a long way.
That's right, brother. That's right, man.
Well, I kept reading, you know, obviously I'm a huge Rush fan as well, and I've seen a lot of the documentaries and read some of the articles, and they never worried about their negative press because, as they describe, very often the negative press was not really about them. It was about the critic showing off that they went to a show and look at how mean I can be and look at all the words I can do and all the cute lines I can make. It had nothing to do with the music. So they quickly learned to just ignore those. But, you know, they've had millions and millions of devoted fans for over 40 years. And so clearly they're doing something right. And they've heard from those fans. Yeah. And that's what makes the difference.
Yeah, totally, man. I know I listen to a few different folks online, and they're adamant. Nope, don't read the comments. Just focus on doing good. And as long as people are listening or watching or whatever, then you're doing fine. You know, if things are in the shitter, you might want to go read a few, I guess. Right. Maybe you're a bit of an ass. I don't know. But, you know, if I was to ask you that, like, if there was one thing you would want to share with our listeners before we get out of here today to get people excited about your industry and why they should be more, at least educated about your industry, what do you think it might be? Where might you send them? What might you leave them with?
What I would want people to walk away from is don't trust simple answers. Great example recently is Elon Musk just offered $100 million prize for someone who can come up with the best way to capture carbon. Yeah. And the answer is there isn't one best way, because a lot of folks, and this is our bumper sticker technology, you know, this is electronic graffiti where people can quick fire off a response and try to think they're clever, like the stupid kid in the back of the room who's making snappy jokes. Right. You know, Elon Musk puts this out and all sorts of people jump on saying, trees, do I get the 100 million? Well, that's much too oversimplified. Well, trees are going to be one component of dealing with a climate crisis. Yeah. And by climate crisis, I mean absolutely everything from what's literally going on in the atmosphere to agricultural practices, to industrial practices, to everything. There's so many aspects that will play a role in the answer. Don't trust anyone who gives you just one answer because it'll answer everything. They're probably trying to sell you something.
Yeah.
Oh, that's very wise.
So
for real. I
mean, I made jokes about organic earlier, but to be honest, there is absolutely a place for that. You know, if you have a backyard garden or a village and a small scale operation, organic can be fantastic because you can pay attention to the entire crop, but it's not sustainable on a global scale. Your yield is dramatically reduced, but it has its role. What they call industrial farming also has its role, because we have over 350 million people who need resources, and you can't generate all that, with a mom and pop operation on 4 acres. That plays a role. The environmental side often gets, I won't go there. Yeah, I mean, there's the commercial side of the big seed companies. Again, that has to play a role as well, because the seed you put in the ground is part of it, but agricultural production goes into feeding animals and to feeding fish farms and to generating oil and generating ethanol.
There's a lot of byproduct. There's a lot of waste.
Silage. I mean, you harvest the ears, but then you have silage, which goes to feed cows or feed pigs or feed goats or whatever. So there's so many levels. So please appreciate that there's going to be multiple answers and multiple solutions, and they're all going to take time, and they all require understanding. But carpet bombing everything else and saying the only way we're going to live is with solar. Well, no, it's going to be solar and wind and nuclear, because you can do that in a clean way. We're still shackled to 1960s technology for nuclear energy, and that's obviously not working. Yeah. We're a little better than that. I mean, even can we at least use 1980s technology?
For real, right?
But there's going to be multiple answers. So please allow for depth of response. I've said it before. Our social media world is now, our whole world has just been habituated to electronic graffiti. We're slinging half sentences back and forth. And it's like a bumper sticker philosophy. You're trying to explain something in a little square. Well, you can't explain anything in that small. All you can do is mislead people or have a cute one-liner, and that's counterproductive. It makes you maybe you feel good because you ever got off a zinger, but
those quips tend to fuel us.
Yeah. They don't help anything.
So perfectly,
they don't. Man,
exactly to what the world is right now.
Yeah. That was a banger, dude. Thank you. That was well done, man. Totally unscripted too.
Pull that when you decide to post something.
I think we found our title.
Yeah.
All right. Cool.
Well, I do post on Twitter, and a lot of it is to share my the scientific stuff I've seen, and so I try to think about, am I posting for myself, or am I trying to share something I know with other people? Am I trying to come up with a one-liner? And I try to be mindful of that.
Yeah.
There's a time and a place for a good joke,
of course,
or a movie line,
of course.
But try to separate joke from a cut down or an insult.
Yeah. Well, I think all too often we end up repeating this cycle of behavior to where no matter our environment, no matter the people, no matter the subject matter, we react the same. We don't change. We don't adapt to the environment. We are nowhere like a chameleon. If it's not our way, if it's not the way that we expected it to be, then it's not going to be.
Yeah.
Just hell no, that's not my way, right? So I think that what you covered is so on point with the things that Jeff and I discuss here on a weekly basis. Being open about things that you don't know you need to be open to. Like, you can't shut shit down before you know all the consequences or all the factors, right? So thank you for that. I don't think you intended to do it that way, but it's how you did it. I like it.
Yeah, you asked, and I try to think in terms of the whole plant science. Why do I want people to think about plant science? Well, you don't have to understand the molecular side of what we're doing, but I want you to understand that it's important to do, and that there's going to be lots of different components that play a role in whatever answer we're coming up with.
Of course, and no matter what answer you have, there are going to be consequences from that answer. Mm-hmm. Some good, some bad, right? And it just depends on who you are, if they're good or bad. Right?
Very true. Very true.
Man, you got anything else for this genius over here?
No, it was awesome to have you on. I loved it.
Yeah, man, it's been a real treat. What is your Twitter handle?
Cygnus Plant X-Ray. So that's CYGNUS. And so that's a nod to both Rush as well as the first X-ray source detected in our galaxy in the 60s.
I'll be damned.
So that was the first X-ray source. I was one of the first X-ray imaging specialists for plant biology.
There you go.
So that jumped in. So
Cygnus Plant
X-Ray.
Right on, man.
PLANTXRAY.
We will get this linked out there for you so our listeners and viewers can go and find you on Twitter.
Cool. Absolutely.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
All right, man. Well, hey, without any further ado, it's been absolutely amazing having you here.
Yes.
Again, thank you for having that hellish month so that you could join us here in St. Louis. And thank you for being with us here today. And man, we hope that you have a wonderful evening.
Yes.
We'll do. Jeremy, Jeff, it's been a pleasure. You know, back then, as I said, adventures are great to look back on, but at the time, it was living hell.
Yeah.
Of course, it always is.
Yeah.
It always is, right? All right, guys and gals, we're out of here. We love you, and we'll see you next time. Peace.
Later.
Not to lose, not to lose, not to lose.